Hi, I'm Cindo Peterson, one of the ministers here at Trillium United Church. Throughout this season of Lent, we have been exploring the stories of Holy Week. This Sunday, under our theme of service, we came to share the story of the Last Supper. Our storytellings have been done through dramatic readings with a narrator and possibly a voice of an actor or two, while our children and youth have been miming the story dramatically and then forming a tableau so the congregation can be drawn into the moment of the finality in the story. Our story of the Last Supper, we go through Jesus arriving and fixing the table for his disciples, the disciples arriving and sharing in conversation and food together. We formed the tableau moment just when Jesus has informed them that one of them will betray him, and he knows what's up. The tableau formation was done to recreate Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. And in that moment of pause, everyone was invited to just be in that moment. Think about what it would be like to be told that he knows one of you is going to betray him. Shortly after that moment, Judas kicks back his chair and we see him leave. The gospel that we took the story from has Jesus then breaking bread and sharing in the elements, telling his people that when they eat bread to remember that this is his body, and when they drink the wine to remember that this is his blood that will be shed for them. This was reenacted at our Last Supper table, and from that sharing of the elements, our disciples got up from the table and went to various locations in the sanctuary, and our Trillium family of faith were invited to share in that Last Supper, to share in those elements of bread and wine, the bread of life and the cup of life. From that point in the story, we wanted to take a deeper look. What else happened at that Last Supper? Our scripture reading, along with our theme of service, delved into the foot washing story. We find the foot washing story only in the Gospel of John. And John was the one at the Last Supper that we're told he leaned in. He leaned his head against Jesus' chest and he heard the heartbeat of God. In sharing the story of the foot washing, we invited people to lean into this story, and in it they would hear the heartbeat of God. Before we got into the story too much, though, we wanted to look at a few of the background stories. The Gospels need to be woven together sometimes to get the full picture. So we had just shared a story of the Last Supper, but we didn't know that in Matthew, earlier on, just a few days before, Jesus had been teaching and telling his disciples that whoever wanted to be the leader, they needed to be a servant and slave to all. And that message probably wasn't sinking in. And before the foot washing story that we hear in John, Luke says that Jesus has just said that his time on earth is up and it would be up to the disciples to take the message out. And the disciples start bickering about who's going to be the leader. So here's Jesus now sitting at a table that he has shared the elements, charged his men, and if there were women there, to go out and be leaders and servers to the world. And they just weren't getting it. So I think Jesus would have been looking around, feeling a little disheartened, knowing that he'd been talking and teaching for 3 years, and here are the closest followers bickering about who's going to be the leader. Jesus silently gets up from the table, grabs a pot of water, and starts to wash the feet of the disciples. Now, this act alone in the Jewish time frame is something only a slave would do, a servant or a slave, never a master or a teacher. Even disciples would not wash the feet of a rabbi, just a slave. This is a horrible act if you think about how dusty and dirty feet would have been. But here we find Jesus, without speaking a word, washing the feet of his disciples. Most of them are in stunned silence, so he goes along and quietly serves them, humbly, lovingly, tenderly washing their feet. We find he gets to Peter, and Peter vehemently opposes this. He knows that this is wrong. A master should never be washing feet, and he was not going to let Jesus do it. And Jesus just quietly reminds him that he needs to be able to show them this. He needs to let him wash his feet, or he's not going to get it. He's not going to be able to be a follower. So we find Peter kind of flip-flops and goes, okay, I'm all in, I'm all in. He doesn't really get it, because Jesus is saying, no, you don't need to have everything washed. You're not all in. I just need to wash your feet. I just need to show you this act. He further explains to the disciples that they're probably not going to get this whole teaching until he is gone. Luckily for us, the disciples did understand and take into their heart. They wholly leaned in and got that heartbeat of God, because they did take that life of service and walking humbly in love and serving others out into the world. They brought us that story. So we are called now to be part of that foot washing, to serve humbly and lovingly. A lovely modern day take on that story is Mother Teresa was once asked by a reporter how they could help. How can they help out? And they were waiting for the reply that, well, you could give some money to this house for the poor, or maybe you could give us a radio spot so that we could get the message out to a larger population. But Mother Teresa's reply was, find somebody nobody loves and love them. That's the message that Jesus is giving us. Find the somebodies that nobody loves and love them. Serve them. Humbly show them unconditional love. That's what being leaning into is. Leaning into and feeling and sensating and hearing that heartbeat of God. That's what we do when we serve humbly and lovingly. So we invite you to serve with a humble and loving heart. And in that way, your Christ light will shine to the whole world. Be that light to the world. Until next time, namaste.